Good afternoon, folks. It's a little after 3, so we'll begin our August 17th meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Welcome, everyone, and as usual, we'll begin our meeting with an invocation led by Commissioner Ray.
Given the invocation at a meeting like this, as I serve longer, I realize the importance of this seat and of this board. And I wanted to, not to try to copy our chairman, but I thought I've got to start putting more time into it. So I like to watch some of the old Billy Graham sermons. And I learned this past week about a book in the Bible that I didn't even really know existed, Habakkuk. And Billy Graham broke it down so good that he said Habakkuk asked God, "God, what are you doing?" And he said, "I can't tell you, because if I told you, you wouldn't believe me." And he said, Billy said, that's why he doesn't put his faith in the United Nations. He doesn't put his faith in government. He doesn't put his faith in money. He puts it in God. And when I heard that, it really humbled me down. And so I'll ask if you want to bow your heads in prayer, and I'm going to try to reflect on that. Our Heavenly Father, we come to you today, and I, for one, know that I have been trying to figure things out when I should really be trusting in you. I know that you have the solution to all these problems. We as your people just need to show our faith in you and believe in you. So I ask that you protect this country, protect all the people that are hurting, that are sick, law enforcement officials, EMT, and give us the strength to make the right decisions that would please you. In God's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Take an opportunity each meeting to recognize those county employees who have provided us tenured service to the county, and I'll do that at this time with 5 years of service. We have Tammy Carpenter in the Health Department, Kyle Haupt in Parks and Recreation, Paul Woods in Public Works, William McWhirter in the Sheriff's Office, Earl Ford in Social Services, James Huntley in Transportation. With 10 years of service, we have Jason Gurian in 911 Communications, Philip Henson in the Board of Elections, and with the Sheriff's Office, Ralph Ford and William Walden. With 15 years of service, Board of Elections, Brett Vines, and the Sheriff's Office, Dwayne Fitchett. With 20 years service, Tommy Gallus with the Sheriff's Office. 25 years of service, Lori Pierce with the Sheriff's Office. And then we had some June retirements, Anthony Parker with Veteran Services with 12 years service, Thurman Hayden Henson in Transportation, 13 years, Wayne Gagnon in the Sheriff's Office, 22 years, and David Pierce in the Sheriff's Office with 28 years. So we thank you for your service and your contributions to the growth of Union County. Our next item on the agenda is informal comments. Is Mr. Hayden McAteer here? Mr. McAteer, you have signed up that you want to talk about Orchard Park. And according to our rules, the public hearing was held last meeting, and you cannot speak about the subject of the public hearing in informal comments. So those comments are closed. But we appreciate your interest and your desire to be here. Thank you so much. We also have some informal comments that has been provided to the clerk. And so at this time, Lynn, is there one or two? Just the one? I'm going to ask the clerk to read those comments into the public record, and I will go ahead and take responsibility. Typically, we limit speakers to 3 minutes. Lynn has practiced a time or two, and it's a little bit longer than that, but based on the fact that we have no other speakers, we have plenty of time, we're going to let those comments coming in their entirety so we get the gist of what the speaker was intending to say. So, Madam Clerk, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I am reading these on behalf of Sanford L. Stillman, Jr. He was unable to be at the meeting today, and he asked that his comments be read into the record. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the issue of Union County's Confederate Monument. Two of the most precious rights that citizens of our country have are first to be able to address our political leaders, as we are doing today. The second is to have disputes resolved by the rule of law and not by rank, barbarism, or uncontrolled riots. After watching the past 6 months unfold, I have to wonder whether our descendants will continue to enjoy these sacred rights. Those who fail to learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them. I have asked that each commissioner be given a copy of the remarks made by then North Carolina Attorney General and future Governor Walter Bickett at the time the monument was dedicated on July 4th, 1910. This speech reveals the true motives behind the erection of the monument. It was to honor the men who fought in defense of their homes and families against an invading army from the north. Quote, "For 4 years you presented your bodies a living sacrifice upon the altar of your faith, and under God worked out for your country a deliverance from a body of death, and made your sons and daughters the heirs of hope instead of fear, of peace instead of war, of life instead of death. Here and now, on behalf of those sons and daughters, I make acknowledgement of the debt we can never pay," end quote. There is not one word in this speech of slavery or white supremacy, but only a humble gratitude for the men who defended their homes and families, asking nothing in return. I was puzzled why it took until 1910 for this monument to be erected 45 years after the end of the war. Bickett alludes to the reason at the beginning of his remarks, stating that Union County was rocked in the cradle of poverty. Union County was never a rich county, and after the war, things got worse. Husbands, fathers, and sons were dead, leaving widows and orphans to scratch out a living from Union County's hard, unforgiving soil. It took until 1910 to come up with enough money to erect the monument. There was no corporate donor to bankroll the project. The men to whom this monument was dedicated gave their lives as an example of courage and duty in the face of overwhelming odds. Their courage was an example to their sons, grandsons, and great-grandsons who fought in every one of our nation's wars in the 20th century. The erection of the monument also represented a moment of healing and reconciliation for the people of Union County. They were now fully a part of the United States, but could still honor those who fought in Confederate gray. My family is from Western North Carolina. I had relatives who fought on both sides during the war, including members of the Starnes family from Union County. I can honor all of them for their valor and conviction for the cause for which they fought. The Confederate monument sits where it should be, in a prominent place before the old Union County Courthouse, as a reminder of the men and their families who suffered through that awful war. Those who would remove the monument have decided that anything to do with the Confederate States of America should be excised from the history of the United States. This cannot be done. The Confederacy is a fundamental part of the history of our county, state, and nation. Those who wish to remove the monument are following in the footsteps of Joseph Stalin, who attempted to rewrite the history of Russia, to comport with Marxist-Leninist teachings, and Adolf Hitler, who attempted to Nazify Germany by burning books and exterminating the Jews. Those who fail to learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them. Those who would attempt to alter our history by destroying symbols of events that they do not like are only fooling themselves. One can only learn the lessons of history from true history, not a sanitized, politically correct history. I have watched over the past several years as this destroy the monuments craze has swept through North Carolina, Durham, Chapel Hill, Raleigh, Salisbury, Gastonia, and Alamance County. Those attacked in the monuments have done so with violence or threats of violence to achieve their objectives. I was appalled when rioters pulled down the monument in Durham and then no one was prosecuted for that act of vandalism. My heart was broken when cowards under cover of darkness threw paint upon what was the most beautiful monument to the Confederate dead located on Ennis Street in Salisbury. Violence will only beget violence. We cannot live in a civilized society where the rule of law does not prevail. We have a fundamental failure of the political leadership in our major cities. They hope that if they leave the rioters alone, that maybe they will just leave. They do not understand the psychology of the mob. Success will only embolden them. Giving into them will only increase their demands. One group attacking symbols sacred to another group will in no way address any of the legitimate grievances that the first group may have. Removal of the Union County Confederate Monument will be given into those who wish to rewrite our history and take us down the path of enforced political correctness. Now is not the time for politicians to lose their nerve, to cower under threats of violence, or to look for compromises to slither away from tough decisions. The time has come to draw a line in the sand and have the courage to enforce it. Thank you for the opportunity to share these thoughts with you.
Thank you, Lynn. That concludes our informal comments. It's now time for additions, deletions, and adoption of the agenda. I would make one note that with regard to the regular agenda, item 25 has been revised, and you all have a copy of that in front of you. We have a motion. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Takes us to consent.
Motion to approve consent.
Have a motion to approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, none. Takes us to old business. Orchard Creek. Mr. Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The board conducted a public hearing on this item at their August 3rd meeting. Board heard a presentation by the applicant where they described the project in detail. In addition, several residents of the surrounding community shared their concerns about the project. Some of those concerns included traffic, stormwater runoff, and the request was not in character with the rural nature of the area. And the developer has provided some agreed to conditions on the project. I'd just like to read those into the record quickly, just in case the project was approved. One, that the development will be subject to the conceptual rezoning plan submitted as part of the conditional rezoning application. Two, the uses allowed on site are single-family detached homes and their accompanying accessory uses, as well as passive and active open space areas. Three, that the development will meet all conditions as set forth by the Union County Environmental Health Department and Union County Building Code. And four, the development is subject to all other applicable requirements of the Union County Development Ordinance, as well as all other local, state, and federal requirements. Those are the developers' agreed to conditions. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have of me.
Can you explain the first comment, about the zoning? Is it the first item that you read? That said
The condition?
Yeah,
Okay.
explain that a little more, please.
Sure. So that first one was the development would be subject to the conceptual rezoning plan that was submitted as part of the conditional rezoning application. Part of what was in your agenda packets was the copy of the proposed layout of the subdivision. So what that's saying is that if the rezoning was approved, it would have to be developed in accordance with that conceptual level plan. So the general layout of the street, the general layouts of the lots, the setbacks, they would all have to be developed in accordance with that plan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any of the board like to offer a motion? Mr. Helms?
I respect the developer's thoroughness trying to prepare, but I'd make a motion that we deny. We've talked during the public hearing, there was a lot of talk about 1.5 miles on Rocky River Road. I don't know that I agree with the concept that that road can handle that influx of additional traffic. However, once you hit the roundabout, you either gotta come to Monroe or you gotta head up toward Charlotte. Heading up toward Charlotte takes you down Potter's Road. Potter's Road is slammed right now. I do not think our infrastructure is at a point that can support this kind of density, especially out in the rural area. The roads weren't built to handle that kind of density. And so therefore I make a motion that we deny.
Would you include in your motion adopting the consistency statement?
Yes, sir, I would. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion discussion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Takes us to item 24, Confederate Monument. Since I asked for this to be placed on the agenda, Commissioner Ray, could I have a moment? We had several people in informal comments last week and again, our last meeting and again this meeting, speak in reference. This is a topic that has been shared with us from numerous communities throughout the state of North Carolina, our state capital, and across the country. So I felt it important that we listen to the citizens and bring it forward. So that being the agenda item that we have. So Commissioner Ray, didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
That's fine. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we hold a public hearing for the purpose of hearing from the residents of Union County regarding the location of the monument. In order to provide sufficient public notice, I would add to my motion that the public hearing be held on September 21st, following our regularly scheduled 3 p.m. board meeting, and that staff should identify the appropriate time and provide notice as soon as possible to the people and the public.
Okay, we have a motion discussion. Commissioner Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't really have anything in opposition to a public hearing, but I don't think anything that I'll hear in a public hearing will change my mind on the topic. When I was young, you know, we used to hear stories about some people in our class going out and kicking over tombstones in the graveyard. They thought it was fun or funny, and I always found that to be completely disrespectful. And just as Mr. Stillman wrote in his letter, this monument doesn't belong to us. It belongs to somebody else, and they put it there for a reason, and that was to memorialize the Confederate dead. There's also another monument or memorial there located beside of it that's not been mentioned. The concerns thrown up about Walter Bickett and the statements that he made, Mr. Stillman contends that he didn't make the statements that we were told last week. So that's something interesting to find out one way or the other, but it seems to be, to me, the more argument was against Walter Bickett rather than the people who died, who may have been forced to go into battle, may have been forced to fight a war that they didn't believe in. But they were required to go and do it, just as many of our soldiers in past wars have been drafted to go into service for something they may not have supported, but they went and they did what they thought was right at the time. So again, if the rest of you are in for a public hearing, I'm fine. I think it would further divide the community, if anything, to have a public hearing. I think we'll have people on both sides come in and get up in arms about things. And Union County's been a lot better place to live in my lifetime, a lot less contentious racially. We've become a melting pot. We went from 90,000 people in 1990s to 240,000 people now, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. And we've been a melting pot from people all over the country. And I think Union County has lived up to its name. We are a union of people from all over. And again, I'm not in the business of kicking over tombstones and monuments, and I'm not going to vote to kick this one over no matter what.
Thank you, Commissioner Rushing. That was well stated. I guess my only comment would be that you get opportunities when you sit on this dais, and there's an old saying that you're danged if you do and danged if you don't. This is one of those, regardless of how you feel, you're probably not going to win with some group or some people. But as chairman and in the interest of transparency and to be able to provide citizens of Union County to have a say, I certainly support the motion. So all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Takes us to item 25 under new business, resolution authorizing condemnation. Is there someone from staff that's going to comment on that?
Commissioners, as you're well aware, the Yadkin River Water Project is moving forward, and in order to put pipe in the ground, we have to acquire easements from these properties. All of these properties have been appraised. Some we have been able to acquire, some others that we have not been able to acquire. In order to move forward with the project under Chapter 40A of the North Carolina General Statutes, authorization to condemn is necessary from the county commissioners to pick up the property. Does not mean that once we authorize condemnation that we will actually condemn. It just puts the property owner on notice that if we cannot resolve it, that the earliest possible date that we will condemn will be 30 days after that letter. You have any questions?
Richard, is my understanding, once you initiate condemnation, does that change the negotiating standards with regard to price on the property or
No, sir.
appraisal or anything?
No, sir. We can always negotiate and always are still negotiating. Some properties we are close on, some properties we are really far apart on. But once we condemn once we file the notice of condemnation, it really just says, look, we got 30 days to fish or cut bait. And thereafter, if we don't do that, even if we do condemn, we can still negotiate, because once the condemnation action is filed, the money is posted at the Clerk of Superior Court's office, and the property owner has 120 days thereafter in which to file any answer to our condemnation claim. So you have that period of time to negotiate further.
Question?
The problem I have with some of this parcels is the engineering drawings as presented in the last day or so are not as they were presented to me the last time I saw them.
Is this on Yadkin or the other project?
It's on the 853.
Okay, I'm only talking about the Yadkin project. I mean, I'm happy to.
I may be on the, pardon me. Is this just on from the raw water intake to the plant?
This is the raw water intake and would be some finished water lines thereafter. Some of those easements are 60-foot easements, some of them are smaller easements, but
Is this the finished water lines too?
some of them are finished water, that's not part of the project as we speak, but the easements are wide enough so we can put 2 pipes in.
Well, I'm confused now without asking.
These are all the easements inside Union County for the Yadkin project.
Commissioner Akins.
Just to clarify, just because we authorize condemnation does not mean that we will be condemning. This will just open the opportunity to negotiate. Is that correct?
Yes, it will put a deadline down to let's talk now, or we will move forward.
Mr. Chairman, I'll offer a motion that we adopt a resolution authorizing condemnation to acquire certain property or interest in property for a temporary construction easement and permanent utility easement.
Here we have a motion, discussion. Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Usually these have been on the consent agenda, and I've asked it to be moved, and thank you and Vice Chairman Rake for putting it on this item. Just to explain why I'm going to vote against the motion, last week we were in a meeting with Public Works where we were explained how the dominoes fall in these projects. One project leads to another, and if we don't do one project, the other is not required or feasible. If we don't do that project, then maybe another one's not required or feasible. And if you work your way back from this, if we don't vote to do the projects that were put in before us, which we haven't voted in support of those projects yet, then, do we need these condemnations at this point, or do we need to determine where this water is going to go? The problem I have with this is taking it to the western side of the county at Rocky River Road and Seeker's Shortcut Road. And if we don't, then we're putting a lot of people through maybe a hassle that we shouldn't. And again, that's why until we get some firm commitments on what we are going to do, and if everybody's clear, I think, there's possibility that this board, or maybe the next board may vote not to do these projects, and therefore we put people through a lot of unnecessary condemnations. And I think it degrades our how we're looked upon by some of our citizens. So that's why I'm not going to be supporting the motion.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Thank you, Richard. Takes us to item 26, CARES funding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a brief presentation regarding our CARES funding that the county has received, and action that you're asked to take to recognize the second portion of those dollars. The state has allocated $8.8 million to Union County to use for COVID funding, COVID-related expenses from mid-March until the end of December of this calendar year. At least 25% of that, or about $2.2 million, is required to be provided to the municipalities in Union County. The county engaged Central Carolina Council of Governments to manage our funding and an application process for the municipalities, and over the last month, we've been working on that process. We received applications from 10 municipalities with requests totaling $8.8 million, and we have approved, as of last Friday, $2.227940 for those municipalities. And this is the list and the dollars associated with those approvals. I won't read those to you. You can see them. I will just highlight that the 4 municipalities that did not ask for any of the COVID funding were Mineral Springs, Hemby Bridge, Unionville, and Marvin. And the large amounts that you see associated with some of the municipalities are really associated with law enforcement or fire payroll costs that they had that are appropriate for COVID funding. And so we applied a methodology that allowed for 22% of the requests that they made for those particular dollars that had been expended to be provided to those localities. We sent those notices out on Friday. I've heard positive feedback from almost all of them. No negative feedback, but I just haven't heard from every town at this point on the amounts that they were provided. The county funding to date, we've had expenses and encumbrances that total $1.48 million. And I've just highlighted here for you some of the things that we have spent those dollars on. Our grant administration, which is with COG, salary and benefits for employees who work specifically on COVID, benefit payments for the additional county COVID benefit that has been provided to staff, communication efforts, our PPE, facilities-related expenses, and technology expenses. And that gives us a remaining a little more than $5 million that we are working on how those dollars will be spent. And as I mentioned, those can be spent through the end of the year, the end of the calendar year. So we are working on a child care expense reimbursement program. As you're all aware, school started back today, and many students and families are dealing with the virtual learning environment and how they manage the child care for their children. So we've been working with staff to understand what their needs are and are working on a reimbursement program that will give them at least some relief on some of those expenses for the remainder of the year. We have some additional technology expenses that will really enhance our operations because of some of the things that we've learned through COVID. We have additional emergency management expenses that we will continue to have. We will have additional PPE for ourselves through emergency management. And as well, we are looking to spend about $250,000 on UCPS and some of the COVID-related expenses that they have for PPE, mask, hand sanitizer, cleaning products that we're working on purchasing on their behalf. And additionally, we're looking at a potential small business grant program that we would be bringing back to the board at a later date. Those are the highlights of our funding. I'm happy to answer any questions. And you also have an action to take to recognize the second half of our money that we just received from the state so that finance has the appropriate action.
Mr. Ray?
Deputy Manager Lancaster, I know you always do a great job on this. I appreciate it. I would assume UCPS has been made aware of the figure I heard you mention.
Yes, we've been working with their staff to identify the needs that they have, particularly around masks, gowns, some of the harder to find things, and have committed to spending some of our own dollars and using our own resources to find those for them after their 2-month allocation runs out with the state.
Well, I appreciate that. I know you have a passion for children, and just keep them posted, and I know you'll get them all you can.
We will. We are working hard at that.
Mr. Akins?
Would you go back on your slides, please, to the municipalities?
I will.
Can you give us an idea, a breakdown of what those municipalities are intending to use those funds for?
I could give you the specifics in detail. I'm happy to send those to you, but the majority are PPE facilities items that they've done in their facilities if they've put in Lexicon or plexiglass. The big dollar amounts really are around payroll for police or fire personnel, if they have fire personnel as part of their jurisdiction, specifically Monroe. Additional technology resources that they've used for doing virtual meetings, those are all appropriate expenditures. And so the COG staff really went through a thorough examination. We did not obviously approve everything that they asked for. They asked for more money than we had in the entire budget. But we did fund the things that were appropriate for COVID-related expenses. And I'm happy to send that additional detail to the board.
All right. And were there any, I noticed in the county, mentioned that there was a look at a small business grant. Were there any of the municipalities utilizing those funds for similar methods?
There were no requests from municipalities for that type of program.
That's disappointing. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would like those details, please.
Absolutely.
Mr. Helms?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to ask, the $2,227,940, is that 25, is that
It's a little,
at 25%?
a little bit more than 25%.
All right, well, great. The other
Yes.
thing I'd like to ask, this particular type of grant, does it only go to counties, or does it go to school systems, or is there?
So these particular dollars only went to counties, and the second half of the dollars the legislature put in place, the 25%, had to go to municipalities that had not been included earlier. There are dollars, that COVID-related dollars, that aren't in this bucket that did go to schools.
Okay.
We also have other buckets. I mean, there were some actions you had tonight for transportation dollars, senior nutrition dollars, but these were only for counties.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask a follow-up question, if I
Sure.
might, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
You mentioned that the municipalities are using these funds for police and payroll and things of that nature. has there been an exorbitant amount of payroll that exceeds what the normal tax rate pays?
So it's not the normal tax rate. What they've essentially done, and we've done some of this too, if we've had personnel who are primarily responding or dealing with COVID-related expenses, that's what the municipalities ask for, and we actually cut that down to only funding 22% of what they asked for in those cases. So, for example, Monroe asked for about $4.4 million. It was all payroll expenses, and we're only funding $800,000 of that because we thought that was appropriate. It's an allowable expense under the COVID guidelines.
Okay.
Commissioner Rush. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a way to evenly distribute, or is there a formula that we have maybe with either property or sales tax funds that we could evenly distribute it amongst all the municipalities? Or do they have to request a certain amount?
I'm sure we could have come up with a formula. We chose to let them apply because we didn't think, all the municipalities are different.
Right.
So we had a staff group who met with the folks from the COG and really felt like an application process to give them the opportunity to ask for what they thought was appropriate for their municipality was probably the most fair way. As you can see, we have, ranging from $398, that's exactly what Fairview asked us for. We gave them every dollar that they asked for, to, again, Monroe asked for $4.4 million, and we provided them with $888,000.
So that's already done.
Well, we've made the announcements. There will be, I'm actually glad you said that. There will be contracts for all these dollars because they have to follow all the federal guidelines, and there'll be audits of this throughout this process. So any contract over $50,000 will have to come back to the board to approve at a later date. That'll probably be at the next board meeting.
So everything under 50,000 is done?
Oh, yeah, we'll just process those as payments. And these are going to be reimbursement related, so they have to give us the receipts for what they've spent, and then we'll just provide the cash to them on that basis.
I guess out of curiosity, I just wondered if we'd have split it, because even the municipalities didn't apply for it. They still.
I think the problem is, Commissioner Rushing, that, so if we did it percentage-wise, that some of these smaller municipalities would have never been able to spend that amount of money on the reasons that it has to be spent for.
Right.
I mean, that they just would not have been able to do that because it is pretty narrow, the things that you can spend the dollars on. So we wanted to put it in the places that we knew we could spend it.
Right. That'll teach them.
Michelle, to piggyback on what Commissioner Akema said, we were required to give 25% to the municipalities.
At least, yes.
Okay, so, and we're basically the administrator of this, and you tell them what they can spend it on and what they can't spend it on. And in this particular case, Monroe's salaries was one that they could. I understand what Commissioner Akema is saying. I have the same concern. So they were able to supplant money dedicated for salaries with this money, weren't they?
I'm not going to make, I guess, that judgment here. I mean, it is an allowable cost that they submitted as part of their application. In Monroe's case, they did only ask for salary dollars, which was a little different than some of the other applicants. But that is all they requested. And it is allowable under the rules.
But the bottom line, we were required to do 25% to municipalities.
Yes. Yes, sir.
But just to be clear, there was $0 requested by municipalities for any small business assistance.
That is correct. No, that is correct, yes.
Just to follow up, the rules that she speaks of are federal rules. So these are not rules that staff came up with.
It's one of those, it is what it is.
Further questions? Hearing none, I will move that we recognize, receive, and appropriate $4,655,171 of additional CARES funding in the designated Special Revenue Fund, SRO 44. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Takes us to county manager's comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This evening, I have the sad duty to report the death of one of our deputy sheriffs, Christopher Scott Horn, who was killed in an off-duty motorcycle accident Saturday evening. Deputy Sheriff Horn was a valued member of the sheriff's SAFE unit, that's Sheriff's Alcohol Field Enforcement. He served 7 years with the agency and previously had served with Monroe Police Department, Waxhaw Police Department, as well as Stallings Police Department, and they will miss Deputy Horn. The other item that I would like to bring to your attention is the county has received an award. The Behavioral Health Collaborative earned an innovation award through the NCACC, or North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, Local Government Federal Credit Union Excellence in Innovation Award. It was recognizes county employees for developing new and successful programs to improve services to residents, and that was recognized last week as part of the virtual NCACC conference. So congratulations again to all of those in human services. I will tell you that the Behavioral Health Collaborative in large part was the brainchild of Miss Michelle Langster, and she deserves every bit of the credit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Helms.
Yes, I'd also like for, say my prayers for Officer Horn. We take for granted for what they do for us, but they are a vital part of our county and make it a great place to live. And I'm just deeply sorry for this loss. So, thank you.
Mr. Rabe.
No comments.
Mr. Rushing.
Again, prayers for the family of Officer Horn. Thank you.
Mr. Agnes.
I would also offer my condolences to the family. And I want to take this opportunity to encourage those municipalities who applied for these grants or funding to perhaps reconsider. While you can certainly use 100% of those funds to fulfill your bureaucratic needs, I think you need to stop and take a look at the small businesses that are supporting your community, support this county, that live in your communities and live in this county. I think this is an opportunity to perhaps put on your big boy and girl pants and do the right thing by the members of the community that support you day in and day out. So I would just encourage those municipalities to relook at where they're allocating these funds. With that, I wish everyone a good evening.
I have no further comments, although I do entertain a motion. I would like to move that the board go into closed session for the following purposes. In accordance with General Statute 143-318-11A4 to discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses, including agreement on a tentative list of economic development incentives. And in accordance with General Statute 143-318-11A3 to consult with an attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege and to consider and give instructions concerning the handling of the following judicial action: Union County versus Town of Marshall. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Call this meeting back to order. We have information before us, and to get the ball rolling, I will move that we approve a resolution authorizing condemnation to acquire certain property or interest in property for temporary construction easement and water line easement for the 853 West Transmission Main Project. Preference of the board that we read this, or can you read it yourself, or do you feel the need to read it? Since we have a motion, I'll call for discussion if anyone has questions or concerns.
I don't see, Mr. Chairman, I don't see the parcel number reference to this. My understanding, we took the others
Miss-
before. Oh, this is the whole list. We've already voted on most of it except for this, right?
Mr. Long, could you come forward and clarify? So I'm sure there'll be questions. Let's make sure we're clear on all the details.
These are the properties that we have not been able to acquire easements for the 853 project.
And that wasn't covered in our previous vote?
No.
Commissioner Rushing.
Yeah, I think the confusion may be, like the votes, the previous vote tonight was the lines between the plant and Rocky River. That's the other side of this. That's
Other side of 70.
the supply line. Yeah, that's the supply line.
Right.
This is the connection line underneath to connect the Catawba and the Yadkin water line. So this will be the part that connects the two systems.
This project will be running water to Stallings and Indian Trail for the elevated tanks to increase pressure in those zones. It'll be a 36-inch line and a 16-inch line.
I'll be honest with you, the hesitation I have is what we just discussed in closed session.
Yes,
I
sir.
want to see the final drawing before I can, to be honest with you.
That's certainly your call.
Further questions?
So this would be fine.
I'm sorry?
There will be no further discussion on this.
No, sir. I mean, no, that once you approve condemnation, I will negotiate. But if we reach an impasse, I will file, condemnations. They will, as the process is we will certainly try to talk with them about our appraised values. Thereafter, if we're not getting any place on that, and that will be a short window, I'll be honest with you. Thereafter, they'll get the notice of condemnation, which is a 30-day notice. And what it says is that the earliest we will condemn is 30 days after the date of that letter. So if a letter went out tomorrow, for example, the earliest we could ever condemn that property was 30 days thereafter. Okay, and then what we would then file a lawsuit to condemn the property, whatever value that we determined on the property would be posted with the clerk of Superior Court, and thereafter the property owner can still litigate with us over the value of the property, and they have 120 days in which to file their answer to our lawsuit.
So there is still plenty of time, ample time
To negotiate price, not right, at the end of the day, not the property.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, just to make sure we all know what we're voting on, if this is voted down, what's the next step?
You'd have to ask Public Works that. I mean,
There's no bringing it back later on, or?
no, you can always reconsider your motion at another meeting.
Okay, so this doesn't stop you from bringing it back at a later time for for condemnation at that time.
You'd have to follow the proper procedure, but yes, you can always reconsider.
And to, one of the arguments that I've heard made for the Adkin plant was to make that connection. And if you don't make the connection, that was some of the essential argument was that you could connect the two systems. And if you don't do this, you can't connect the two systems, correct?
You will
Public
have
work.
you will have a pipe coming from Yadkin going to nowhere.
Okay, so in order for them to connect the systems, they have to have this, they have
Correct.
to have this property, whether it's by condemnation, whatever. But if we vote it down tonight, it could come back later.
Yes.
Could the vote be made with the removal of one parcel until we get the information that we've asked for?
Yes, you can vote to condemn some, all, or none of those properties. We would have to come back. We would be discussing, and it's perfectly proper to discuss in open session a particular property. It's not proper to do so in closed session. So if that's the wish of the board, you can do so.
Ryan?
Just the schedule, if possible.
Sure.
And John, if you don't mind. So the challenge, if the board decides to remove one of the parcels from this, is that the notice of condemnation cannot be given until the board makes that decision. And that requires a 30-day notice period. So if you do not give the authority for all properties, then we have to come back to you for whichever property or more that you have to take action on, and then it takes another 30 days before we can actually take any action on it if we're unable to come to an arrangement with the property owner. So you're pushing the schedule out to where we can't meet the timeline, and we're still going to be tight anyway when it comes to the construction of this project as well as the construction of the Yadkin. Such the reason why we're asking for the board to give us the authority for all the properties, but still will negotiate with the property owners until such a time where we cannot reach an agreement on that one. So while, yes, you certainly, the board chooses to pull it out, essentially our request, it's not helping us. So
On that one property?
it's not helping us with the project period. You're pushing the project another 30 days out. Because all properties are, we need all the easements in order to finish the property. Yes, sir.
Is it 30 days or 2 weeks we're pushing it?
You would push it another 30 days.
Why?
Because the notice is 30 days. And actually, it'd be longer than 30. It would be longer than 30
We
days.
take action at the next meeting after the engineering has been reviewed, can it not be taken at the September meeting, 1st September?
So we can't promise you it's going to take 2 weeks to get this done. We're going to try to do it in 2 weeks. I can't promise you we'll have all of the design work done and ready in 2 weeks. We're going to shoot for that. I can't promise you that. So if we miss that timeline, then we're even farther behind because I can't promise you it's going to take 2 weeks.
And don't miss it.
Yes, sir.
Our next meeting will be, it's 3 weeks off, and so if you look at that, you're talking about a 51-day delay at the smallest.
But if you come after the
30
drawing,
days delay if we do it today.
That is
So
correct.
it's not 51 days.
No, if you take that off, don't mean to argue with you, Commissioner Ray, but if you take it off of the agenda tonight, your next meeting is 21 days from now. And then if you send out the notice for condemnation the next day, that you're gonna be 51 days out. Because the quickest you can take it, you have to give them 30 days notice.
but if the drawing comes back as you're hoping, and they sign then, you're not,
If they, certainly, if any of these people tomorrow say, thank you, Jesus, I like what you've sent me and let me sign up today, then we're certainly not going to condemn. If it's just a question of getting the values up, understand that what we've done this summer has not been pursuant to appraisals. We just got all of those appraisals in within the last 2 weeks.
Commissioner Rushing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'd caution the board is that pulling one project out of all these, if this does go to court, and there's a potential to go to court, you're setting a bad,
I agree with you,
precedence.
Commissioner Rush.
so it is either a all or nothing. And again, I would just caution other board members not to pick out one parcel out of all these.
I think the heartburn is the fact that in the process of negotiation, we're looking at re-engineering some drawings, and we don't have that answer.
Right.
Having said that, we do have, or at least I do, and I'll vote to affirm the motion, but I have faith in our staff and in our attorney. He serves at the pleasure of the board, that he will keep us informed, and we will not be moving forward with any condemnation until we have the full facts about the re-engineered drawings and how that's going to work, and the property owner has been fully notified and vetted with regard to those changes.
As all owners would be, yes.
And so we'll make that vote in the trust that I have in staff and our attorney. Further
I
questions?
agree with you,
concerns?
Chairman.
Further questions, concerns? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Any further to come before the board? Mr. Manager?
Not this evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you.